Highway 666. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, an ocean of sand and rock beneath the blood-red sky. It was the kind of place where civilization faded into nothingness, where the road seemed to lead straight into hell. Ethan Carter tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The gas station attendant back in Needles had warned him, "Stay off Highway 666 at night. People go missing, and the ones that come back ain't the same." But Ethan had laughed it off. Urban legends. Every small town had them. He was on a tight schedule, and Highway 666 was the fastest route to Phoenix. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he turned onto the infamous road. It was nothing but cracked asphalt cutting through the wasteland. No other cars, no signs of life, just the endless desert swallowing everything. The first sign. An hour passed. The night grew thick, swallowing the last traces of daylight. Ethan turned on his headlights, illuminating the cracked pavement ahead. The radio fizzled with static, then went dead. His phone had lost signal miles ago. Then he saw it. A figure standing on the side of the road, barely visible in the dim glow of his headlights. A woman in a tattered white dress, barefoot, staring at him with hollow eyes. Ethan's heart pounded. He slowed down. As he passed her, she raised her hand in a slow, unnatural wave. His stomach twisted. Something about her wasn't right. Her movements were jerky, like a puppet on invisible strings. And her face, it was too pale, too stretched, as if her skin didn't quite fit. A cold chill ran down his spine. He pressed the gas. The woman disappeared into the darkness behind him. The second sign. 15 minutes later, Ethan checked his rearview mirror and nearly swerved off the road. She was still there, the woman in white, standing on the shoulder of the road. Identical, same tattered dress, same dead eyes, but he had driven miles past her. It was impossible. He shook his head. Lack of sleep. That was all. Just his mind playing tricks on him. But when he glanced back again, she was closer, right behind his car. His breath hitched. That was it. He was getting off this road. He pressed harder on the gas. The third sign. The engine roared. The speedometer climbed. 70, 80, 90. The desert blurred past him. He just needed to reach the next town. Any town. Then, a sign loomed ahead. Rusted. Half buried in the sand. He barely caught the words before he sped past. Welcome to Black Hollow. Population 1. His pulse slammed against his ribs. There was no town named Black Hollow on any map, and there sure as hell wasn't a town with a population of 1. Then, the headlights flickered. For half a second, everything went dark, and when they came back on, the woman was standing in the middle of the road. Ethan jerked the wheel. The car spun out of control, tires screeching. He crashed into the ditch, airbag deploying, glass shattering. Pain exploded through his skull. Darkness swallowed him whole. When he woke up, Ethan's head throbbed. His vision swam. The car was dead. The windshield cracked. He fumbled for his phone. Still no signal. Then he heard it. A voice, whispering. He turned his head slowly. The woman was standing right outside his window, grinning. Her mouth stretched too wide, her teeth too sharp. Ethan screamed, and the desert swallowed the sound. Highway 666, Part 2. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps. His fingers fumbled for the door handle, but something in his gut screamed, "Don't move." The woman's grin widened. Her lips stretched unnaturally, revealing too many teeth. She tapped a single, bony finger against the window. Tap, tap, tap. The sound drilled into his skull. His pulse pounded. He squeezed his eyes shut. This isn't real. I hit my head. I'm hallucinating. When he opened them, she was gone. Silence. Ethan exhaled shakily. He forced himself to move, to reach for the ignition. A hand shot through the shattered windshield. Cold fingers clawed at his throat. He screamed, thrashing, kicking. The grip tightened. His vision blurred at the edges. Then, honk! Blinding headlights flooded the car. A deafening horn split the night. The hand let go. Ethan gasped for air, coughing violently. He turned his head. A massive 18-wheeler screeched to a stop on the road above him. The driver jumped out, a burly man with wild eyes. "Jesus Christ, kid. You okay?" Ethan staggered out of the car, his legs barely holding him up. He spun around, scanning the desert. The woman was gone, not a single footprint in the sand. The trucker grabbed his shoulder. "What the hell happened? You crash." Ethan's mouth worked, but no sound came out. How could he explain? A figure appeared on the side of the road. Not the woman. Another man, tall, dressed in old-fashioned clothes like something out of the 1950s. His skin was pale, almost gray. His eyes were all wrong, and he was smiling. The trucker cursed under his breath. "Son of a bitch, we gotta go. Now." He shoved Ethan toward the truck. Who is that?" Ethan stammered. The trucker didn't answer. He just hauled Ethan into the cab and slammed the door. The truck roared to life. As they pulled onto the highway, Ethan looked back one last time. The man in 1950s clothes was still standing there, watching, smiling, and as the truck sped away, Ethan saw something in the rearview mirror that froze his blood. The road sign, the one he had passed earlier. It didn't say "Welcome to Black Hollow" anymore. Now it read, "Welcome back, Ethan." The truck rumbled down the dark highway, its massive tires chewing up the cracked pavement. Inside the cab, Ethan sat stiffly, his pulse still hammering. The trucker kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his knee. His knuckles were white. Ethan swallowed hard. "Who was that back there?" The trucker didn't look at him. "You don't want to know, kid?" Ethan's skin prickled. "I think I do." The trucker sighed and finally glanced at him. His face was deeply lined, his eyes tired, like a man who had seen too much. "You ever hear the stories about this road?" the trucker asked. Ethan hesitated. "Yeah, some urban legend. People disappear. Weird shit happens." The trucker let out a dry chuckle. "Ain't no legend." A silence stretched between them. Only the hum of the engine and the occasional thud of tires hitting cracked asphalt. Ethan licked his lips. That guy on the road, he looked wrong. His eyes. The trucker tensed. "Yeah, they always got those eyes. Like they ain't human anymore." Ethan's stomach nodded. "Who are they?" The trucker's grip on the wheel tightened. "They're the ones who never left." The words sent an icy shiver down Ethan's spine. "The ones who disappeared?" he asked. The trucker nodded. "Some folks just fade into the road, and when they come back, they ain't themselves no more." Ethan exhaled slowly. "And the woman? The one in white?" The trucker's jaw clenched. "She's been out here the longest. Some say she was the first." Ethan felt a chill crawl over his skin. "First what?" The trucker's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Then he did something that made Ethan's blood run cold. He flipped it up, like he didn't even want to see what might be behind them. "The first one the road ever took," he muttered. For the first time since getting into the truck, Ethan felt something deeper than fear. Dread. He turned to look out the window. The desert stretched on, endless and empty. No signs of civilization. No lights. Nothing but the road. "How far to the next town?" he asked. The trucker didn't answer. Ethan frowned. "Hey, how far? We ain't on the map no more, kid." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What?" The trucker sighed. "Take a look." Ethan yanked out his phone. No service. But when he pulled up the GPS, his stomach dropped. The screen showed nothing but a blank void. No roads, no towns, no landmarks, just an empty space. "We should have hit something by now," Ethan whispered. The trucker nodded grimly. "Yeah, we should have." Then the headlights flickered. Once, twice, and the truck's engine coughed. Slowing, dying. The trucker cursed, slamming the dashboard. No. The engine died. The truck rolled to a stop. And in the silence that followed, Ethan heard footsteps, crunching slowly over the gravel. Coming toward them, the trucker's face went pale. "Don't look outside." Ethan's breath caught. "What? Why?" The trucker grabbed his wrist, his grip like iron. "No matter what you hear, no matter what they say, do not Look, Ethan froze. Outside, the footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, a knock on the passenger side window. Soft, almost polite. Ethan's fingers dug into the seat. The trucker shut his eyes. His lips moved silently, like he was praying. Then came the voice. Low, smooth, almost familiar. Ethan, it whispered. His blood turned to ice. Whoever was out there knew his name. The voice outside the truck was wrong. It wasn't just the fact that it knew his name, it was the way it said it. Drawn out, hollow, like someone trying to mimic human speech but getting it slightly off. The trucker squeezed Ethan's wrist so hard it hurt. His eyes were still shut, his jaw clenched tight. Don't move. Don't speak. His voice was barely above a whisper. They're not real. They want you to think they are. Another knock, more insistent this time. Ethan, open the door. A chill slid down his spine. He knew that voice. Sounded like his mother. Impossible. She was in Chicago, hundreds of miles away. But the cadence, the softness, it was her. His throat tightened. His body screamed at him to look. Just a glance. Just to be sure. The trucker must have sensed it, because his grip tightened. It's not her, kid. Ethan swallowed hard. His pulse pounded in his ears. Then came the next words. Soft, sweet. Baby, it's cold out here. Let me in. His stomach dropped. That was exactly what his mom used to say when she came home late from work in the winter. The memory hit him like a brick to the chest. How could it? No, this was a trick. Something was out there and it wanted in. Ethan clenched his jaw, gripping his knees so hard his fingers ached. The voice outside changed. The softness peeled away. The next words were distorted. Ethan, open the door. It wasn't his mother's voice anymore. It was something else. Something inhuman. The trucker shuddered. They don't like being ignored. Ethan's breath came fast and shallow. The air inside the cab felt thick, suffocating. Silence. Then, the door handle moved. Click, click, click. Something was trying to open it. Ethan clenched his teeth. The doors are locked, right? The trucker didn't answer. His eyes were still shut. His hands were trembling. The doors are locked, right? Click, click, click. The handle stopped moving. Then slowly, the knocking started again. But this time, it was coming from the windshield. Ethan's body went rigid. That was impossible. They were sitting 6 feet up in a semi-truck. No one could reach that high without a ladder. His breath hitched. The trucker whispered, "Whatever you do, kid, don't look." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut. The knocking grew louder. Then it turned into pounding. Bang, bang, bang. The whole truck shook. The glass rattled. And then, a new sound. Scraping. Something sharp was being dragged slowly across the windshield. The sound was unbearable, like nails on a chalkboard, but deeper. Ethan's muscles locked. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. Then, the trucker moved. He reached under his seat and pulled out a shotgun. Ethan's eyes widened. "What the hell are you doing?" The trucker pumped the shotgun, his hands still trembling. "We wait. We pray. And if that don't work," he exhaled shakily, "we fight." Ethan's heart pounded. Fight what? The trucker didn't answer, because outside, the knocking stopped. For a long, horrible moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a single word whispered right against the glass. "Run!" The trucker's eyes snapped open. "Hang on!" he roared. He slammed the keys into the ignition and turned. The truck roared to life. The headlights flickered, and for half a second, Ethan saw it. Something was on the hood. Something huge. The skin was pale and stretched too tight. Its limbs were too long. Its mouth was too wide. And its eyes were completely black. It grinned. The trucker slammed his foot on the gas. The tires screeched. The creature's grin widened. And then, it crawled toward them. The truck lurched forward, tires shrieking as they clawed at the cracked asphalt. Ethan was slammed back into his seat. The thing on the hood didn't fall off. It dug its fingers into the metal, clinging like a spider. His grin never faltered. Then, crawled toward the windshield. Ethan's stomach twisted. It moved wrong. Its joints bent in ways they shouldn't, its limbs too long, too thin. The glass beneath it creaked under its weight. "Faster!" Ethan shouted. The trucker gritted his teeth. "I'm trying." The speedometer climbed. 50, 60, 70. The truck barreled down the highway, but the thing wouldn't let go. Then, crack. A long, jagged split ran down the windshield. Ethan's breath hitched. "It's breaking through," the trucker growled. "Not if I can help it." He jerked the wheel hard to the left. The truck swerved. The thing on the hood slid sideways, but at the last second, it plunged one arm through the cracked glass. A long, skeletal hand reached inside. Ethan threw himself back. The fingers were inches from his face. Then, boom! The shotgun roared. The creature screeched. Its arms snapped back, a dark, inky liquid spraying across the dashboard. The thing reeled, its body writhing like it was in agony. And then, it let go. The wind ripped it off the hood. Its body flipped through the air before slamming onto the pavement behind them. Ethan twisted in his seat, watching it disappear into the dark. But before it was swallowed by the night, he sat up. His head snapped toward them, and it laughed. The sound wasn't human. It was a wet, gurgling rasp that sent a cold knife of terror through Ethan's chest. He turned back around, his pulse hammering. What the hell was that? The trucker didn't answer right away. His hands were tight on the wheel, his face pale. Then, finally, that's what happens when you stay on this road too long. Ethan's breath caught. The road changes you. He shuddered. So what do we do? The trucker exhaled. We get the hell off Highway 666. He pressed harder on the gas. The truck roared forward. But Ethan had a sinking feeling in his gut. Somehow, someway, the road wasn't gonna let them go that easy. The truck hurtled down the road, the engine growling like a caged animal. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears. He could still hear that laugh in the back of his mind, wet, gurgling wrong. The trucker's knuckles were white on the wheel. His jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful. Ethan swallowed. Are we close to an exit? The trucker didn't answer right away. His eyes flicked to the side mirror. Ethan followed his gaze and froze. The thing was still there. It was running. Somehow, impossibly, it was keeping up with a semi going over 90 miles per hour. Its limbs stretched unnaturally. Its arms swung like a marionette with cut strings. Its mouth hung open in a grin too wide for its face. Ethan's stomach turned. Jesus Christ. The trucker muttered a curse under his breath. I was afraid of this. Ethan turned to him. Afraid of what? The trucker gritted his teeth. We've been marked. A cold dread slithered down Ethan's spine. Marked? The trucker exhaled sharply. They don't let you go once they've touched you. He flexed his fingers on the wheel. And that thing? It touched the truck. Ethan's breath hitched. So what the hell do we do? The trucker's jaw tightened. There's a way out, but you're not gonna like it. Ethan swallowed hard. Try me. The trucker flicked his gaze toward the desert. Ethan's eyes widened. You're not serious. The trucker's grip on the wheel tightened. It's the only way. Ethan turned back toward the mirror. The thing was closer. It wasn't just running now, it was gaining. And then, its neck snapped sideways. Its head jerked toward them, and it spoke. Ethan. His lungs locked. The voice wasn't twisted. It wasn't distorted. It was his own. An exact copy. Ethan's fingers dug into the seat. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs. Drive off the road. Now. The trucker didn't hesitate. He yanked the wheel to the right. The truck lurched violently. Tires screeched. And then, they plunged into the desert. The front bumper slammed into the ground. The truck bucked wildly, throwing Ethan against the dashboard. The seatbelt bit into his ribs. Outside, the headlights swallowed darkness. Dust and sand erupted around them. Then, the truck stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. Ethan's pulse pounded. His breath came in ragged gasps. Then, a sickening shriek tore through the night. He spun toward the mirror, but there was nothing. The road was gone. The thing was gone. Only the empty desert stretched around them. Ethan shuddered. Did it? Did it work? The trucker exhaled slowly. Yeah, kid, we're off the road. Ethan ran a shaky hand through his hair. His skin was damp with sweat. The trucker leaned back, rubbing his face. They can't follow you once you leave. Ethan let out a breath. Jesus. The trucker let out a dry chuckle. Welcome to Highway 666, kid. Ethan didn't laugh, because deep in his gut he felt it. Something wasn't right. And when he glanced at the rearview mirror, for just a second, he swore he saw something smiling back at him. The truck sat still in the dark desert, the engine rumbling softly as it idled. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The world around them seemed empty. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, the stars above shining too brightly for a place so remote. He glanced over at the trucker, who was gripping the wheel with white-knuckled hands, his eyes darting nervously toward the rearview mirror. Do you hear that? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The trucker didn't respond at first. His head was tilted slightly to the side, as though listening for something. His eyes flicked to the mirror again. Don't look, he muttered. Whatever you do, don't look. But it was too late. Ethan's gaze locked onto the mirror. At first, he saw nothing but the desert, the endless stretch of sand, rocks, and sparse cacti. Then, a shadow moved. It was dark, unnatural, slithering just out of view. But Ethan's pulse quickened as he realized the shape was growing. Look away! The trucker shouted, his voice raw, but it was too late. In the reflection, Ethan saw it, the figure. At first, it was nothing more than a silhouette, standing still just beyond the range of the headlights. It looked almost human, tall, thin, but with limbs that bent at impossible angles. Its head was tilted in a way that shouldn't have been possible, its eyes glowing bright white, like burning stars. Then it moved. In an instant, it was right behind them, its long fingers scraping the truck's metal body as it crawled toward the rear window. Get out of the truck, now! The trucker screamed, but before Ethan could react, the creature was there. Its face pressed against the window, its mouth opened wider than any humans should, a grin stretching impossibly from ear to ear, its teeth sharp and jagged. Ethan froze, his heart pounding in his throat. The creature's eyes were nothing, just endless, swirling black voids, pulling him in. Don't look into them. The trucker's voice was barely audible, almost drowned out by the screeching of the creature's claws against the glass. Ethan's vision blurred. His body began to shake uncontrollably. Then, a blinding light exploded from the horizon. It was so bright, so intense that Ethan had to shield his eyes. The creature let out a screech, its body flickering like a bad TV signal. It dissolved, fading into the light, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. When Ethan finally dared to open his eyes, he saw a figure standing in the distance. A person, tall, dressed in a long coat, standing perfectly still, facing the road. The light around them was blinding, and yet Ethan could make out the faint silhouette of their face, a figure that seemed familiar, a woman's face. Her features were hazy, but the eyes, he recognized those eyes. Mom, Ethan whispered, but before he could speak again, the figure vanished, gone, swallowed by the light. The desert around them fell completely still. The trucker's voice broke the silence. We have to leave, now. But Ethan couldn't move. His mind was still spinning. What had he seen? Had it been real? Ethan, we don't have time. The trucker's voice was tight with panic. We have to get back on the road now. But the road wasn't there anymore. The place they were in, had it even existed? Ethan looked out the window. There was no road, no sign of the highway, just desert. This isn't real. Ethan breathed. This isn't real. The trucker's grip tightened on the wheel. His eyes were wide, panicked. It's the road, kid. The road won't let you go once you've been marked. Ethan's thoughts were in a frenzy. The figure, the eyes, the creature. Had it all been a hallucination? Or was it something more? Something alive? He looked back at the trucker. What do we do now? The trucker didn't answer. His hands were shaking. The truck's engine sputtered, flickering at a loud, sickening crack echoed through the cab, followed by the distinct sound of scratching. Ethan's heart raced again. He glanced at the window. The thing was back. But this time, it wasn't just behind them. It was inside the truck. The claws scraped across the seat. The sound so sharp it sent a jolt of pure terror through Ethan's veins. "Move! Move now!" the trucker screamed. Ethan didn't need any more encouragement. He yanked open the door and bolted into the desert. His feet hit the sand, and he stumbled, his mind too frantic to process where he was running. But as he glanced back at the truck, he saw it. The creature's face pressed against the glass, its eyes still glowing, its grin widening. And then, the truck exploded. A massive fireball erupted, sending a shockwave that knocked Ethan off his feet. His ears rang as he lay in the sand, gasping for breath. And above him, the stars shimmered too brightly, as if they were watching. Ethan lay on the hot sand, gasping for breath. The desert stretched out in all directions, barren and silent. The fireball from the truck's explosion illuminated the sky, casting an eerie glow over the dark landscape. But even as the flames consumed the truck, the world around him seemed strangely quiet, almost empty. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs shaking. His heart still raced in his chest, and his mind struggled to process what had just happened. The creature, the trucker, the explosion. It all felt like a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream. The air was still thick with the smell of burning rubber and gasoline. The remnants of the truck smoldered in the distance, casting long shadows that twisted and writhed in the heat. Ethan's throat was dry, his vision blurred from the smoke. He stumbled forward, his mind fighting the overwhelming urge to look behind him. He knew the creature was still there, somewhere. He had to keep moving. With each step, the weight of the desert pressed harder on him, like an invisible hand trying to drag him down. The air was suffocating. The sand felt like it was trying to pull him under, and the silence was deafening. But then, he heard something. A low, raspy laugh came from behind him. His body went stiff. The laugh was too familiar. Ethan, he turned, his pulse racing. Standing in the distance, in the very place the truck had exploded, was a figure. It was the same figure he'd seen before, standing tall, unmoving. But now the face was clearer, and it was his mother. Her features were too perfect, too still, like a photograph that had come to life. Her eyes glowed white, and her smile stretched unnaturally wide. "Mom!" Ethan choked out, his voice breaking. She didn't answer. Her lips parted, and the voice that came out was not hers. It was distorted. "It's time to go home, Ethan." He took a step back. His heart pounded in his chest, the world spinning around him. But then, the ground beneath him shifted. The sand seemed to rip apart as if the earth itself was coming alive. Ethan's legs gave out, and he fell to his knees, the ground trembling beneath him. From the cracks in the earth, dark, shadowy tendrils emerged, curling around his legs, pulling him down. "No!" Ethan screamed, struggling to break free, but the tendrils tightened, dragging him into the earth. His mother's face grinned from the distance, her smile widening as the shadows swallowed him whole. And then, silence. Ethan never made it off Highway 666. Those who traveled that cursed road were always marked, always dragged into its endless grasp. Those who disappeared were never seen again, and those who returned changed. Ethan's story, like all the others, became another whispered tale, another warning for those who dared to venture too close to the cursed road. And the road? It was still there, waiting, still hungry, still alive.